Today we are presenting our business idea, Systems of Reuse. Human waste in the form of the deceased are taking up a lot of space in our nation. It is projected that in 50 years, all cemeteries in Utah will be filled up. Besides this, traditional funeral services are extremely harmful to the land.
So my personal experience, so in South Korea, it was a very eye-opening experience for me on the issue of waste. So while visiting a columbarium, I was very bothered because, I'll tell you later, but columbariums are places where urns and memorials are held so people can go visit their passed away loved ones. And so while I was pretty bothered because they're all very clumped together, and so it didn't really give me a sense of respect or privacy. And so when paying my respects, I kept on getting distracted by the cramped space because other pictures were right there. And so this made me realize that the problem that could affect the United States in the future relates to the decreased amount of burial lands.
Okay, and so our solution for this, to avoid this problem in the US, our solution was to pass a legislation that would incentivize resignation. So the legislation would do that by providing some benefits such as maybe tax breaks or some to the funeral industry who starts using resignation. And so resignation is, it's been called water cremation. It's a gentle process where water mixed with potassium hydroxide, which is commonly found in dish soap, is used to break a body down into bones and liquid. This was originally made for medical schools to dispose of organs and other organic waste, but recently has become very popular in burying pets. And 17 states have already approved this to be used with humans, and over 5,000 people have already opted into this process.
Reclamation is a clean and sustainable way to reduce the eco-impact. 17 out of the 18 environmental impact factors chosen to be analyzed has already demonstrated that reclamation will reduce impact by a large margin, as shown on the graph.
Resonation also helped with emissions, resonation did well in emissions, it did well in land development, and it did well in climate change. So resonation has no greenhouse gas produced, so it produces no emissions, it has no negative effect on climate change, and for land development, there's no need to put a casket in the ground, which could potentially affect its development. So it also doesn't affect that. So it's a good option.
So resonation produces two byproducts. It produces bones and some organic material. The bones and organic material are very ecologically friendly and can be used in fertilizer, which is what we plan to do. This type of fertilizer has been around for decades, for centuries, and it was using animal bones initially, but now we're going to use the bones mixed with dirt and the organic material as fertilizer, and that's one of our business options to sell. And this high phosphate nutrient fertilizer is very good for flowering plants such as roses.
With resignation, we'll free up much land, and this land can be used in many ways, but the idea is to let the state find a way to repurpose it. Some options would be to create a public space, such as in Berlin, they converted a cemetery to a playground. And another option is to make it into real estate, which there's always a large demand for.
So there's a potential consequence. So according to an article, in China, more than 50 million remains of the deceased have been forcefully moved by the Chinese government to different locations to use the land for agriculture or other real estate uses. And this has made the public very angry. Our expenses. Our expenses are mostly the machine. So the resonation machine costs about $300,000.
And the process to make the fertilizer, we need a crusher, which costs about $2,000. And so that's the machine cost. But per day, for resumation, our cost would be around $3,200. And the cost for upkeep of like making fertilizer would be around $140. So that brings the total cost around $3,410. Our revenue, so we're planning to charge $2,500 per resumation. This is a very competitive price to cremation, which is around $2,700 on average. This is, and then another revenue source we have is the fertilizer. And per day, we have averaged around $10,000 in total gained. So our profit margin is around, we make around $18,000 per resonation, because it's minus the cost it is to have it resonated. And we make around $60 per body fertilized, or made into fertilizer. So our estimated profits are $5,130 per day. And this isn't factoring in the land cost or what we have to pay to get the facility.
And so our team consists of me, I'm Jan. This is Domingo, Rico, Moon, and Richard. We all go to West High School, where we're all a group of friends, and we all go to the same swim team. Thank you for listening to our presentation. If you have any questions.
Do you anticipate any issues when it comes to kind of cultural challenges or some kind of pushback with that?
So we do, but the same thing, we realize that the same thing, especially with religious things, when they want to be, when cremation was introduced, it was also very unpopular with religions and all that stuff. But after a few years, they eventually ended up accepting it, and eventually we'll have to find an alternate method to burials because we're running out of space. So I feel like this will be like a great method.
Okay, so we know that when starting a product, when starting a service, there are technical risks and there are market risks, but really market risk is greater than technical risk. So knowing that, where are you starting with your service? And then how are you going to determine, or did you already determine interest at the place that you're starting?
So we were planning to start here in Utah. Utah was one of the 17 states that was already approved of this.
Okay, so let's go narrow. Where are you starting within Utah?
Salt Lake City Valley. So there's also another cemetery in Utah, which has started to do a thing that they call green burials, which involves burying with biodegradable caskets and plant-based embalming fluids. So that it's already been, people have already started to think about effects on the environment and effects of how much space is required for this.
So are you telling me you're going to start with the cemetery? I'm not quite clear where you start specifically.
We would probably start there.
Thank you so much.
I'm following up with that. What is your marketing strategy going historically? Do you have a strategy?
So we plan to try to pass legislation, because this is a really big problem facing land. Right, you can't use all the land for cemeteries. So we plan to start with legislation that tries to encourage resumation, to give us more of a incentive to start it, and then we have an actual market to start it on.
So candidly, my firm actually has an investment in what's called the death care industry. That's a terrible name, that is what it's called. And so we own a number of different mortuaries and cemeteries across the country. One of the issues for the death care industry, just from a purely financial perspective, is that people are moving more towards cremation than after burial. And the hard reality of it is that burial is more profitable than cremation. So the more people that move to cremation, the less money these companies are making. Do you have a sense, because how much you're charging for your product is roughly similar to cremation. Is it a more profitable model than cremation? Because if it is, then you might have something you can rather than what you go to market, if you go to Samsung and sell this to a card, you can sell this product through the laboratories that already exist, and you can say to them, hey, you guys are hurting because everyone's doing the cremation. We can do something similar, but it's more profitable to you. That, I think, is kind of how you might be able to get this thing to market, potentially. So that's kind of a question. Is it more profitable to a mortician than cremation?
I think it's around the same originally. That's why we plan to sell the fertilizer, which might bring us a little bit over the edge in profit, because the fertilizer makes around, I think, $60, well, $300 per day added to the regular cost, which I think it brings us over the edge.
Right. I think if you could figure out a way to price this so that it's more profitable than cremation, probably less profitable than burial, then I think you might have a product you can potentially sell into that market. Putting aside the